Are any statements that you make funny before or after somebody laughs at them? Are you beautiful before or after someone tells you? I feel like this sort of notion that we need to have some type of external reaction in order to validate our internal purposes or internal feelings is sort of a miss. I feel like in a lot of ways we have to learn to laugh at our own humor. We have to learn to sort of be authentic to ourselves, not necessarily just in our cultivation of self, but in our appreciation. And that's not to say disregard everything in regards to a social setting and say, you could just do anything negative to people. That's not what I'm saying at all. Of course, within moral reason and trust and truth. But overall, I feel like laughing at your own humor is very important. Or doing anything in regards to yourself, in regards to your own cultivation, in regards to your own livelihood is important. I feel like the more we let our guards down with ourselves, the more we let ourselves actually exist as we are, the more we allow ourselves to be, humorous in our own sense, or appreciative, or beautiful in our own sense, or secure or confident in our own sense, the more those qualities will actually be abundant in the world that we live in. And I feel like in things that are a matter of perspective, it's about taking a perspective that accommodates you. I feel like what's the point in sort of not laughing at your own humor in a real sense? I was thinking about this the other day because I don't even know when it came about, to be honest. But I just at one point was like I don't ever validate the funny stuff I think in my head or the appreciation for the things I do on a regular basis. Like I don't ever give myself that validation because I think we've taught ourselves to expect it so much from the outside world, or to only expect it from the outside world, so much so that we fail to give it to ourselves. And that's not to say just sit there crazy looking and just laughing at your own internal monologues, but I feel like it's a bigger reference to the way we don't appreciate ourselves, to the way that our authenticity is at times stunted by our inability to give us the things that make us authentic, inability to give ourselves validation for the things that make us us. And while I feel like the self is somewhat of a fluid thing, I feel like there are certain instantiations and certain characteristics and principles and actions that we feel align with who we are. And I think it's at those times that we truly have to validate them. It's at those times that we truly have to give it the type of appreciation that it deserves and feel the gratitude that we want to experience from, future occurrences in the world. I feel like the same reason why we keep experiencing the same things is because we aren't changing something. And I feel like, at least to a minimal degree, the way you feel about yourself and the way you feel about the world around you influences the way you interact with the world. It influences the opportunity you get. It influences your life path. It influences pretty much everything that you experience. So it's not necessarily just about always changing some subtle external thing like starting to work out or starting to do something in regards to your daily routine or plans, but understanding that you also have to make change in the perspective that you have on yourself so you can be better equipped and so you can actually move into something new. If we always feel the same way about ourselves and we think we're in that same stuck position, like if I think of myself as some sort of negative thing, or I don't have confidence, or I can't do this, I can't do that, regardless of what externally changes, as long as I still feel that way inside, I won't be able to be my most authentic self. I won't be able to let my guard down enough with a situation to realize it's just a situation instead of a problem. We won't actually be able to inhabit the world as long as we're stuck in our minds. And I feel like the reason that we're stuck in our minds sometimes is because we're expecting so much validation from the external world. Because we fail to give ourselves enough security, enough perspective, and enough love to actually be here right now. Instead, we're constantly living in reference to our previous thoughts, our previous self, other people, other goals, aspirations, and outcomes. We're draining our energy away from the present moment so often that I think a lot of us fail to realize who we are within the present moment. And I think that's part of the unknown that's super scary, is the lack of validation, the lack of feeling that whatever your path is leading you to is something worthwhile or something that is guaranteed or certified. Tomorrow's not even promised. And I'm not saying that to say give up on your aspirations or goals. I'm saying that to make people recognize, at least make myself recognize, that it's important to sort of be where you are. It's important to sort of understand that you have to build everything from the standpoint of the present moment. Otherwise, you're building in reference to things that don't actually exist, and we're bolstering ourselves up and sort of playing defense from the world when we're really just attacking ourselves. I feel like a lot of times when confronting our problems, it's about understanding that the best way to attack a problem is to play no defense. It's to play no defense, to completely let your guard down, to completely say to the problem or say to your situations, or at least say to yourself, that who you are is not at all determined by whatever occurs in this specific situation. And in that way, you allow it to be. I feel like the only reason we have so much friction between us and our problems is because we feel like we are part of the problem, or we feel like whatever this problem is needs to be a certain way so we can feel a certain way about ourselves. And I'm not saying this to say disregard the events of every problem. I feel like everything has a causal order. It's important to avoid danger in some scenarios, and it's important to learn from your mistakes. But I feel like when it comes to our value of self, our value of who we are and how we move forward in the world, I feel like it somewhat is a disservice to ourselves playing so much defense from opportunities we have no idea the outcome of. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean go do some random dangerous stuff. I mean in reference to our actual goals and aspirations, things that we authentically want. I'm not necessarily just talking about for some type of monetary gain or something like that, but the things that we do for ourselves to make ourselves feel most like ourselves. The things that you do that make you feel like you. And I feel like we need to learn how to do those things and appreciate ourselves for doing them. Love ourselves through those actions and learn to understand ourselves through those actions enough to recognize we can love ourselves anytime. To recognize that, your love for yourself should have no condition, and self-love doesn't have any condition. You don't have to jump through hoops to be yourself. You just have to allow yourself to be. I think a lot of people are looking for themselves, but the only place you can find yourself is where you are. And we want to learn so much about ourselves, so we try to do it in effort, but we don't learn in effort, but in willingness to listen. I feel like it's all about strengthening yourself, your true self, enough to recognize that you don't have to bolster some ego or some mind around the situation in order to be a part of it, in order to navigate it, in order to go through it. The best way to go through anything is to grow through it. It's to understand that you are not just the problem you face. You're not just that single instantiation or part of negativity. You are the whole of everything that you experience, and it's important to sort of navigate life from a open perspective, an open focus. I feel like when we squint our eyes and search, we have such obscure vision. We get so preoccupied with single tiny things that we lose track of everything else that's going on. And I can't even lie. I was just doing this like maybe 20 minutes ago. And as I'm making this video now, I'm recognizing that the intention and the presence that it takes is not necessarily difficult. It just needs to be done with intention. There's times where our mind will slip away and we'll get into a headspace of, oh my God, like it's all coming crashing down on me. There's so much to it. But if we take things at face value for things that we just have to do, oh, I have to do just a couple assignments, or even taking things head on, one step at a time. I think it's important to not perpetuate more issue, not to add to our own suffering by suffering before it's necessary and bolstering up the thing that's making us suffer. If you have to get, for example, I don't know if this is a great example, it's an example. If I have to get like my blood drawn or get some type of shot or some type of anything, and I'm afraid of needles, the overzealous thought about the pain or the fear of needles, the fear, is going to make that experience and the time before that experience so much more negative, so much more draining than the actual experience itself. And I think we do this a lot with everything in our lives. We allow single instantiations of fear, single bits of worry and doubt to cloud everything that's possible in our lives. We always think that the negative has such more of a possibility than the positive. And I think in that way, negative things are more likely to occur because we think they do. Because we can't acknowledge bits of positivity. And that's what I mean by laugh at your own humor. Every second that something bad isn't happening is a good thing. So we need to justify that and validate that with some type of good feeling, some type of gratitude. It's important to also not let your gratitude live in reference to each other in this regard. Because I realized when I used to, try to account this gratitude to that gratitude, oh, like this is better than this. When you're allowing everything to be in reference to time almost, or be in reference to itself, you lose the subject of what you're actually looking at. And I think it's important to just be grateful for everything that's good, and just be grateful for it as much as you can. Not necessarily in reference to anything else, but be thankful. And I'm not saying that, you you can't thank someone more for something or something else, but saying that we need to learn how to give thanks, period. We need to learn how to be grateful, period, and be here and be present, period. Otherwise, we're always going to be in the past or in some moment that we actually don't desire to be in. I realized a lot of the things I was running from in terms of my fears, in terms of my anxieties, was just, I don't know, me playing defense against a version of myself, or me thinking that I had to think through this or this had to go a certain way in order for me to feel valid in who I am, in order for me to be here. But I'm already here. I'm here right now and I'm doing just fine. We need to recognize that we are much larger than any scenario that we play out in our head, much larger than any circumstance that we face in life. As long as you're alive, I feel like you're winning. Your value is not in your utility, rather your very existence. And I think we just have to give ourselves that humor day in and day out, and learn to laugh at our own jokes. Learn to sort of navigate life through our own perspective, not necessarily disregarding everything around us, not necessarily disregarding the perspectives of others, allowing them to be so prominent that yours is allowed to be prominent too. I feel like when we reference our shine to other people's shine, and then we sort of dim our own light, even if we feel like we shine brighter. We're not made to live in reference. We're made to be ourselves. We're made to be individuals, be authentic to who we are. And the contrast that is between us, not necessarily for comparison, but it is to make each other stand out, to make everyone more individual, and to make everything more beautiful when it comes to its totality. And I feel like if we can just let ourselves do that, and let ourselves all sort of laugh at our own humor, and appreciate ourselves and give ourselves a pat on the back, then the world that we see will be much more filled with love than anything else. And I think in filling your perspective with its own sense of love, and filling yourself with, I guess, a better idea of your own appreciation, then what you experience in the world will be filled with that appreciation. Like recently, I've been trying to, once again, feel grateful for what I have yet to have. Feel a large sense of gratitude and positivity surrounding who I am, and what I'm doing, and everything. And just being grateful in the moment. Expressing gratitude for pretty much everything I have the opportunity to. And that's why I said, like, even if you woke up this morning, it's a reason to be grateful. Or every bad thing that's not happening is a reason to be grateful too. The world contains so much possibility, and I think we have to pat ourselves on the back sometimes for just being here. We all have been through a plethora of events, I guarantee. But we're still here to be able to recall them, to think about them, to overanalyze them, and whatnot. So there's gratitude in that too. And I think if we learn to be grateful in that regard, then we can cut through any bit of negativity that we experience in our life. Because as long as we are able to recognize that a situation is just negative, then we can recognize our contrast to the situation by giving ourselves more affirmation and more love. All that is to say, I think we just really just need to learn to laugh at our own humor. Learn to be ourselves in a way. And I feel like that's not even something you have to learn. I feel like it's more so something you have to allow yourself to do. It's not about your overzealous thought about who I am and how do I act like myself. It's about letting yourself go and seeing. Smiling and watching, in a sense. Being optimistic, but keeping an open perspective. Not necessarily saying put your whole life on autopilot and don't care about what happens. But understand that sometimes our mind adds certain connotations to our actions, certain connotations to the events that take place in the world, that makes it so much larger than it actually is. Once we accept things as they are, or once we accept ourselves as we are, everything will just become as it is. And whether or not that's negative, whether or not that's bad, is just going to be subject to how you deal with the situation. But I feel like the best way to deal with a situation is to deal with it as a situation. not necessarily a problem, not necessarily bolstered with the negativity that you have within yourself. And that's why I feel like it's important to be present whenever we're facing anything. Because if we're able to be present with a situation, or at least present with ourselves during a situation, then we contain all the opportunity to actually do something. And if we recognize that we can't do anything, then it's just about getting it out of your mind. If it's not in your hands, it shouldn't be it shouldn't be in your mind. And I recognize, there's certain circumstances and situations that are inherently negative, and they do hark on us, regardless of whether or not we can control it. But I feel like it's in those times we have to give ourselves the most amount of love we can, the most appreciation we can. Because even if we can't control that, the one thing that we can control, the one thing that we can have influence over, is our perspective. And if we can make our experience any better by giving ourselves love and appreciation, then there's no reason not to. All that is to say, please take care of yourselves. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. If you didn't, thank you anyway. I really hope you guys are taking care of yourselves and doing what you can with what you have, and learning to sort of be within the moment rather than be within the past or be within some type of thoughts about the future. I feel like, yeah, you can have plans, but the only way to actually fulfill a plan is to act upon it in the present. So